Hello, I'm Nicholas Whitmore, and I'm going to talk to you a bit about social engineering. First, I'll talk a bit about myself. Once again, I'm Nicholas Whitmore. I'm actually an interdisciplinary studies student. I study computer science and business with a minor in terrorism studies. My goal is a job in computer security, working for the government. And today I'm going to talk about social engineering attacks, which we talked about quite a bit in the class videos, but I'm going to try to emphasize some of the defenses against them that people use, which we didn't talk about as much. So one type of attack is called tailgating. It's basically the process of following someone into a secure building when they hold open the door for you, or you just sneak in really quickly. And it happens all the time. Some studies show that 40 to 60% of entrants to a corporate workplace tailgated in, just snuck in, and obviously not all of those people are going to be attackers. Most of them are just employees that didn't swipe their card, or just friends that walked in, but it is a huge opening for attackers. So there are a lot of solutions to tailgating. Some of the classic ones involve revolving doors and turnstiles that are designed to only let a single person in at a time. So you'll see these at some big businesses. You swipe in your card and go through just one at a time. There's no way for multiple people to get through the turnstile. And changing employee behaviors is also a classic solution, basically just educating people, and you'll find that's a solution to a lot of these problems, focuses on educating your employees. But now there's a lot of more advanced measures available. So one is cameras paired with software that count the number of ID cards swiped versus the number of people that actually entered the buildings, and they'll be allowed to count those faces and figure out if the same number of people and ID cards actually entered. And if not, a lot of them have facial recognition software implemented so that they can recognize employees' faces, so they can see whether each person that entered is in fact an employee, and they could even send out an automatic alert to the employees to warn them about that security breach or reprimand them if necessary, either the person letting people in or the person who followed someone in. And if they're not an employee, then obviously they can then immediately alert security of their presence. So another common social engineering problem encountered is whaling. It's a form of spear phishing or targeted phishing where higher up executives are specifically targeted. It often uses fake emails or websites, and executives are a good target because they have the most power, they have the most control of things, and yet they have very little computer knowledge compared to an IT person or someone. So, and they often want administrative powers that they don't need. It's hard to tell an executive no on having control over a system. So if you can compromise an executive account, a lot of times that'll give you a lot of power. And at the very least, it's going to give you a lot of information about the corporation. Personal emails and things are going to contain very high level information if you can compromise an executive. One example is in 2016, an executive at Seagate answered a whaling email and gave out W-2 forms for 10,000 current and former employees. He just sent out all these tax forms that contain important information like social security numbers on them to a random scammer. And that's just one example of how this problem can affect people. So the solutions to whaling are kind of broad, and there's a lot of them, and none of them are 100% perfect. One easy one is marking external emails, so you can set up your email system to specifically mark emails that were sent from external systems, which phishing emails often will try to pretend to be someone within your own organization, and that's going to prevent that and make it harder for them to pretend to be that person. But obviously that's only as good as your actual email account security is within your organization. So you need multi-factor authentication for your email accounts to help prevent those from being compromised, so that someone just doesn't compromise an email account from within your organization and then use that to send the targeted phishing emails. So having a well-established verification process is probably the best thing that you can do to prevent these attacks. So that means that before anyone does anything crazy and sends out personal information or social security numbers or makes a big payment, wires some money, there needs to be some multi-step authentication processes to verify that this email actually came from who it came from, which has some practical limitations because obviously it slows things down and people might act irrationally when they get a request for, like, quick, we have to wire you a bunch of money, or the Federal Reserve really needs you to give this tax information. And people are going to panic, but there needs to be a well-established verification process to go through for things like, who is it that I need to contact before I send anybody any W-3 forms. So there's some other automated solutions like filtering systems for especially things like fake domain names. It's a pretty common trick to make it seem like something came within your own system, just to change the domain name with something tricky like change an L into a 1 or a O into a 0, something that's just easy for the human eye to pass up, and those can be filtered out automatically. Client-side certificates can be helpful in verifying the authenticity of emails, and overall you just have to train executives too, which can be a difficult task. So a lot of corporations are just going to have mock attacks and fake phishing attacks so that they can see which employees are actually going to listen to those and what kind of phishing attacks are actually going to work on those employees. Why are they working, and what employees need better education and better discipline. And that's a pretty good procedure to have for your organization. So there are some big practical implications to this stuff. It's going to be important to a lot of corporations, big and small businesses, on many levels. Tailgating, for example, can even lead to physical theft. So there's some obvious motivations for corporations to prevent that, and letting attackers get into the building physically opens up a lot of other security vulnerabilities, letting them eventually get access to server rooms and things. So tailgating can just be a huge thing. If you can keep the attacker out of your building, you have a much bigger advantage than someone who can just walk into your building. And obviously on whaling, executives have huge amounts of sensitive data, so whatever is compromised from the executive is going to be worth a lot, even if it's just an email account that could have tons and tons of sensitive data. And then if you can further trick the executive into sending you money or sensitive information, or you could take over the executive's email account and use it to trick other employees. So there's just a huge amount of possible attacks if you can compromise an executive. And so compromising abilities in executives are just big, and these companies need to implement controls for them. And in conclusion, humans can be a major vulnerability. There's all sorts of different social engineering attacks, and there are steps that can be taken to prevent them. Education, training, and procedures are often key steps, but there's also technological support, as we've seen, that can combat some of these problems and
interesting ways, new things like facial recognition technology. So, thanks for listening.